When two wonderful actors, Kylie and Sandy, asked me to do a character analysis for Hero from Not to Do About Nothing, I was like, yeah, sure, no worries. And I thought, what would I actually say about Hero? Because she's such a tricky character to perform well because she has so few lines and so little power in the play. It can be really tricky to feel like you're creating a unique character while also being true to the text, because of course we don't want to be creating random stuff that's not based on what Shakespeare actually wrote, right? So how do we do that? How do we create a rich character that is memorable when she's got like 40 lines? So I thought in this video, what I would do is start with what do we actually know about Hero from the play in the actual text. Then what can we infer? What can we guess based on some of the clues that are there, even if it's not explicit? Then next level, what is not stated? Where do you actually have room to move? So I'm going to give you lots of things in that last section of the video. I'm going to talk about here are the things that you can make choices on that you really got free range. I also want to show you some character prep hacks that I do that can be really handy, not just for Hero, but for any character that you do in Shakespeare from now on. And of course, Shakespeare is your gym. It makes you a better actor. So I hope this is not your first or your last Shakespeare character that you prepare. If you don't know me, I'm Sarah Gio. This is Shakespeare with Sarah. And on this channel, I make Shakespeare feel doable, even if you are completely new to Shakespeare. I have so many videos that talk about technique, different characters, all the plays, all that sort of stuff. So subscribe if you're on the journey. Okay, before I jump into what we know, I actually want to show you the character research hacks first, because it'll really help you prepare. Even if you just got a couple of minutes, these are some little things that I like to do to quickly revise a character. Okay, so first I went to open source Shakespeare. So you will see it is free, and I go to advanced search. From there I can select the character of Hero, and I'm going to actually put 100 results per page just so I can see everything at once. And here you go. Here are all her lines, all in one plate. Now you can see there's actually not that many of them. She's only got 44, but it gives you a sense of when is she talking a lot, when is she not talking, and also it gives you a chance to compare her language throughout the play. Does it change? Does she get more direct, for example, or does she get more flowery and romantic? All of those things are really useful to look at. And when you've got big chunks of text, you can kind of compare them as well. Something I noticed straight away is that she has this where honeysuckles ripen by the sun. So she's got this really beautiful poetic language, which gives us a little bit of insight into what she might be like as a person. Trust with Shakespeare, but that the way that they speak, their language is insight into the character, not just that everybody speaks like that, because that's not the case. Not all characters speak in that kind of beautiful poetic way using metaphors about flowers and stuff. From there, I can also easily check how she speaks about other characters. So there you go, she's talking about Beatrice there. That's in the gulling scene, the trickery scene. And interestingly, she says almost nothing about Cordia, except for like a couple of lines later. So interesting to note. The other thing that I did is I grabbed my GPT prompts. So I have a little collection that I use and I just copy and pasted them in here. So this is some basic questions. It just is a great way to revise what I know about Hero, about the play, especially if I haven't watched it for a while or read it for a while. It's a really great little insight. And then I've got some further questions if I want to get a little bit deeper. So I just quickly pop them in there to get a little bit of insight. I created these character prompts for my students, and I'm happy for you guys to have them as well. I'll link it in the description. It's really handy just to get you started. Now, of course, always be careful with AI because they don't get everything right, but they usually are pretty good for giving you the basics, especially if it's a fairly well-known character. All right, now let's talk a bit more about what we know about Hero. Okay, so let's start with what do we actually know about her from the text? We know that Hero is the daughter of Leonato, the governor of Messina. What I find useful here is that even though she's technically not royalty, a governor is not really royalty as such, it can be useful to think in your character prep about royalty. If perhaps you're in the UK and you watch the ins and outs of the royal family, or if maybe you're in the US, you see the daughters of presidents, for example, and the kind of environments that these people grow up in. I think that would give you a really good idea of what it might have been like for Hero as she grew up. There would be a lot of social pressure, a lot of expectations, and she is very much a golden child. She is the person that says, yes, dad, I'll do what you want. She's the only child. And so it's important that she does the right thing. And that's partly why I think she doesn't say too much, because maybe she has some opinions that she's keeping inside. And that's a lot of what you're going to be doing while you're on stage, right? Having opinions and keeping them inside. But they count. Thinking on stage is a lot of your job here. We also know that she has a cousin called Beatrice, but they are more like sisters. They've actually been sharing a room for the last 12 months at least, except for the one night that she gets accused of sleeping around. What are the chances? Beatrice gets to be a bit more of a rebel because she doesn't have that social expectation. She's kind of a black sheep. She can kind of do what she wants. And we know that Hero would like to help Beatrice settle down. She says, I will do any modest office, my lord, to help my cousin to a good husband. So even though Beatrice and Hero really love, trust, respect each other, Hero would like Beatrice to maybe calm down a little and also maybe settle down with a nice guy. And Beatrice actually wants the opposite of the Hero. So Beatrice says, yes, Faith, it is my cousin's duty to make curtsy and say, Father, as it please you. But yet for all that, cousin, let him be a handsome fellow, or else make another curtsy and say, Father, as it please me. So what she's talking about there is that if Hero was looking for a husband, that of course Hero is going to say, sure, Dad, whatever you want, I agree to any sort of marriage, because she has to. But Beatrice is encouraging her to go, you know what, he's not that good looking. So you know what, I'm going to make my own choice. So they're clearly very comfortable with each other. And maybe they balance each other out a little bit. We also know that Hero has met Claudio before the play starts. Claudio actually says, I met her before. I thought she was pretty good looking, but there was a war going on. I had other things to think about. So now that I'm back though, I really think I should act on this. What do you guys think? This is him talking to his mates. Now, there's actually nothing in the text about how Hero felt about Claudio before. So you can think about that for yourself. Did she even like him? We get the sense that maybe she did. She seems to have a bit of a ooh, but that's up to you. But it's up to you to decide of how much interaction they might have had before. It's not specified. Let's talk about what we can infer from all the clues in the text. We know pretty well how important her reputation is based on her place in society. Even we know that from historical context, that someone in her position, if she were to be disowned by her father, which is pretty much what nearly happens when she's accused of sleeping around before marriage, she would be out on the street. She would have nothing. So when she faints, when she's accused of sleeping with someone else before marriage, it's not just her being melodramatic. It is truly, truly scary. This is a public shaming situation. And we know that even in modern day, that stuff happens. So this is something that I would encourage you to go and have a look around at, is where are there examples of public shaming that maybe you can kind of draw on that actually means something to you? What's your opinion on that? And how would you respond if you were in that situation? And adding on that historical context of it really is, it's life or death. It's not just cancel culture. It's like, you would probably die. You would have nothing to your name. We can also infer that she's had a lot of structure growing up, good education. Her language is very clever, very witty. She's able to make jokes, but she doesn't really get crass with it like some people do in the play. She's willing to get in on the joke, tricking Beatrice into thinking that Benedict likes her. And obviously she's got her cousin's best interests at heart, but she's also brave enough to say when they're tricking Beatrice and Beatrice is listening in, oh, everyone thinks she's really arrogant. She's always really rude. So she's got a bit of courage there as well. We can also infer from the text that she seems to be pretty keen. She feels very modest generally. It feels like early Juliet in Romeo and Juliet before she sort of does her own thing. Okay, so let's talk about what are your choices now. My favorite bit. As I mentioned before, your job in this is really going to be about having opinions on everything. You're really thinking and breathing a lot of the time. And it's often a game of trust to know that that's enough, that you don't actually have to always be overreacting. It can be hard. Pull yourself back and trust that your deep insights, your POV for Hero is enough and it will read. So what I encourage you to do, and this is what I teach my studio members and my private students, is to create a one-sentence POV worldview for the character. It has to be really nice and short and sweet. You could even think of it as a life motto. These can vary wildly from person to person. So having that slightly different take on how hero sees the world can really help you create your unique take on her. Because whenever we create our point of view, we really are coming at the character from a different direction. These can vary a lot from actor to actor, which is awesome because it means that whatever you create is going to be uniquely yours. So here's some examples. I'm so lucky to have such wonderful people in my life. No matter what happens, I always have my family. Be a lady. Be a lady. It's just simple, it's evocative, it means something to you. There's not a right or wrong. What I'd encourage you to do is choose a couple of options. Do a couple of sentences, maybe one that feels very optimistic, one that feels maybe more cynical, for example, and maybe one that feels more neutral. Come up with a couple of options and try them out in rehearsals. When you have that point of view, it gives you a base to react from. Because if I'm thinking, be a lady, then when someone does something crass, inside I'm thinking, like, okay, don't laugh too much, right? And that, it colors, it informs everything I do, all my choices. Whereas if I did, I have such wonderful people in my life, then when someone makes a joke, I might laugh more, right? I might be more outwardly affectionate, for example, because that's where I'm coming from, wanting to connect with people. So you try different things, work with your director, for example, and see how it's actually coming across. As actors, we're not always the best judges of whether it's working or not, whether it's actually reading. So make sure you check in with your director or teacher so you've got that outside eye. So here's some things I encourage you to think about for this character. Firstly, how does she feel about having to be this model daughter? Does she enjoy being the golden child all the time, or is she a little bit sick of it sometimes? And it might be a mix. If you notice, she's often objectified. She's treated like a possession. She's referred to as a jewel. And then when Claudio denounces her and accuses her of infidelity, he calls her a rotten orange. So often the men in the play particularly forget that she is a human. So have your thoughts on, is she okay with that? Is she okay with being in the spotlight all the time in this particular sort of social position? Does she find it constrictive to always have to do the right thing? Is she secretly rebelling in small ways? There's no evidence in the text that she's much of a rebel, but you never know. There could be something small that she does, whether she's just, in her bedroom swearing, or she has a secret cigarette out the window. What are her little acts of rebellion, or does she not have any? Depending on how rebellious you think she is, it's going to affect how she plays things like playing the trick on her cousin Beatrice. If she is actually a bit of a secret rebel, she's really going to relish this chance to be a little bit sneaky. I was going to say naughty, but she's not really naughty. Being a little bit sneaky. And if she prefers to do the right thing, she might be even a little bit more anxious during this scene. There are options to play with. And again, check in with your director, make sure it kind of works for the whole play. What is her relationship with her dad like? One of the most heartbreaking moments in the play, in my opinion, is how quickly her dad denounces her. It's pretty horrific, really. He basically says, I wish she were never born. In fact, once a couple of guys had said, yep, we're pretty sure she's been sleeping around, he says, hath no man's dagger here a point for me? And after he says that, hero faints. So in that moment, you could choose, she's fainting because her relationship with her dad is so close that she can't imagine that he would ever change his mind about her in that way. Or it could just be more to do with the fact that she knows she's in serious trouble and serious danger if he's actually going to give up on her. So if they're not that close, it might be that one. But if they are close, it's more of a heartbreak. How does she feel about Claudio, really? We know that they met before he went to war, but you could decide whether you think they actually had some interactions. Did they have some flirtations? Was there a sense that they were actually going to get together? Or was it more like they kind of knew each other, it seemed like a good match, and she's going along with it because he seems pretty cool? That's really going to inform how you play that end scene as well. Now, I don't usually encourage creating a lot of backstory for Shakespeare. It's often not that helpful. It can trip us up, and sometimes it leads us too far away from the text. But something I would encourage you to do is create some memories, maybe journaling or, guided visualization where you're thinking about what actual interactions did you have with Claudio. Create them for yourself. So when you're interacting with him, there's just a little bit of history there that you can draw on. Right, now the big one, how do you play that end scene? When she's like, yay, I'm back, let's get married. And every modern audience is like, but why? This is definitely one that you're going to have to work on in consultation with your director or teacher, because it's going to vary a lot depending on how the character of Claudio is played. Whether he's a super jerk to begin with and very shallow, or whether he's actually a nice guy that really got led astray and he's really repentant at the end. If he's still kind of arrogant at the end, maybe you have a little bit more sadness or darkness there in that ending. A production I really recommend you watch is the Public Theatre Shakespeare in the Park from a couple of years ago with Danielle Brooks as Beatrice. It is a really fun production and you can catch it online for free. And it's really interesting how Hero reacts. She follows the text, but she also brings her own little stuff to it that really makes you go, wow, she's standing up for herself in her own way. And I'm guessing that they would have created that together with the director and the whole team. It is a nice moment that might help you find a little bit of balance. So I highly recommend going and watching that one. I'll link it in the description. I recommend watching a few different productions of Much Ado if you can. It really does help you think about how you are going to make choices and bring different things to the table. There's lots of ways that particularly this end scene is played. The Kenneth Branagh film still holds up quite well. It's a really fun one. Kate Beckinsale does a good job of showing us that character journey of Hero. It's not particularly different or exciting, but it's actually a pretty good example of a traditional version of what you might do, especially if you're like, well, we're still going to have a happy ending at the end. It is worth watching. One of the things that's really tricky that you have to keep in mind with this is that it is still a comedy. Now, of course, it's going to depend on what your director wants to do with this, but ultimately, you're going to have to keep some of the levity in mind, because Hero's reaction to Claudio is not the last thing that happens in the play. They then have to move on to Benedict and Beatrice get together, and Hero switches into, oh, I found a letter, and so Hero has to be kind of okay. So I would encourage you to think about, well, how can I make this work? Which is why I recommend that Public Theatre production. It's smart in that way. Okay, so I'm going to pop on some other useful videos for you to check out next if you're new to Shakespeare. Remember to check out the links in the description. I've got the prompts for you and also the link to the Public Theatre production. I hope that helps you out. Chookers for your production.